This would be ironic or amusing if it was not reflective of a deeper pathology at the heart of the Harper administration. How does a political leader in Canada's Parliament on such a crucial issue, in fact, an issue that in many ways defined our foreign policy for a generation, end up giving the exact same speech as another country's leader, let alone one who was the key leader of George W. Bush's coalition of the willing? And there's another question. How can Canadians trust anything that Mr. Harper says now? To put it bluntly into vernacular, how can they possibly believe Steve? The decision on whether to commit troops to join the war on Iraq was by far the greatest test leaders across the globe faced this decade. As we have seen, and there's much more, Mr. Harper couldn't and didn't find his own voice. He couldn't and didn't find Canada's voice, so he begged, borrowed, or stole someone else's voice.
Shame.
This isn't just deeply embarrassing for Mr. Harper. I suspect he would have been expelled from Princeton Collegiate, let alone a university, for pulling this kind of stunt. But it speaks to the heart of what is deeply wrong with the Republican conservative government of which he is the leader. It's an ideological copycat of somebody else's idea of what is right and what is wrong. Whether on Iraq, or China, or human rights, or the death penalty, or trade policy, everything in the Harper government is borrowed or copied from somebody else. La droite américaine milite pour la peine de mort. Alors, Stephen Harper suit le même chemin et anéantit 40 ans de leadership canadien sur cette question. En effet, il a dit qu'il était parfaitement acceptable qu'un citoyen canadien soit exécuté par un autre État tant qu'il considérait cet État comme démocratique. Désormais, c'est Stockwell Day qui peut décider si un citoyen canadien doit périr aux mains d'un gouvernement étranger. Donc, dans les faits, Stockwell Day est le juge et le jury, et les Harperiens laissent les autres États se charger du travail du bourreau. Apparently, Stephen Harper doesn't understand that governments, even democratic governments, make mistakes. Apparently, he's not familiar with names like Donald Marshall, Guy-Paul Morin, David Milgaard, and Stephen Truscott. The arbitrary absurdity doesn't stop there. We've seen a trend develop in the past 2.5 years. Stephen Harper picks and chooses which Canadians deserve help when they're in trouble overseas. If you're unlucky enough to find yourself in trouble in the wrong country, you're out of luck. Like Brenda Martin in Mexico, who had to beg and plead to get more than just a photo op with Jason Kenney.
Shame.
Like Bashir Makhtal, a Canadian citizen imprisoned in Ethiopia for the past 18 months after being illegally detained in Somalia. Despite not being formally charged and not being able to see a lawyer, the Conservatives have said they are satisfied with the treatment that he is receiving. Like Omar Khadr, after every other Western government has intervened to get its citizens out of Guantanamo, after the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that the detainees are not receiving real justice, after even Senator John McCain, to say nothing of Senator Obama, has said that the prison at Guantanamo should be shut down, after all of that, the Conservatives still think it is acceptable for Omar Khadr to remain detained in Guantanamo.
Shame.
He's now started,
Shame.
This young man has now started his 7th year at Guantanamo Bay. He was detained at the age of 15. This summer, the Supreme Court of Canada said that the conditions of Omar Khadr's detention at Guantanamo, and I'm quoting, constituted a clear violation of human rights protected by international law. Quote, John McCain, this is the U.S. Republican Party speaking now, has said that he would repatriate Khadr if Canada asks. The only barrier to this happening is one person. The only barrier that stands in the way of Omar Khadr being brought home to face Canadian justice and not American military law in the United States. The only man standing in that way is one man, Stephen Harper.
Shame.
The last time I checked on my Canadian passport, it does not say, quote, valid only in certain countries. It doesn't say the government can choose to ignore this document if you don't fit the right profile. Omar Khadr is a child soldier. His case should be settled in Canada, not in a military prison in London. Policy has to be based on a knowledgeable, constructive, and engaged approach to the world. That's our great tradition. It's our great tradition as liberals, yes, but it's our great tradition as Canadians. It's transcended partisanship until this point in time. It's only now that we have this Republican takeover of the Conservative Party that we see life going in a different direction. The Harper agenda is dominated by domestic politics. It's fitful, it's erratic. There's an alarming superficiality to all of it, as if it only mattered to a few people and a few constituencies. We need something different, we need something better, especially when we're dealing with issues that are so deeply critical to a peaceful world. Nos positions devraient être fondées sur la loi internationale et sur les valeurs et principes universels. Nous avons tissé des liens amicaux avec de nombreux pays. Et nous devons être fiers de notre propre histoire, de nos réalisations diplomatiques et de nos engagements en faveur des droits humains et de la primauté du loi. Le Canada se rabaisse lorsqu'il se contente de si peu, lorsqu'il voit le monde au travers d'une lunette si étroite, lorsqu'il transforme chaque question en politique étrangère dans une farce partisane, au lieu d'y voir la chance de faire preuve du bon sens politique. Our foreign policy needs to be based very clearly on some very basic objectives that we share as Canadians. The need to reduce and eventually eliminate absolute poverty and disease, to prevent conflict and war and to be more effective in doing so, to ending nuclear and weapons proliferation, and to bringing countries together in an effective plan to fight climate change and to fight environmental degradation. Stephen Harper describes Kyoto as a, and I'm quoting now, as a socialist plot.
Shame.
But the Liberal agenda is to make Canada a leader in fighting pollution. We can only achieve great goals together. They require a world order that's firmly based on extending the rule of law. They will be assisted by a world commerce that's marked by fairer trade with clear rules that are applied on an international basis. For example, if Canada took seriously the notion of a responsibility to prevent conflict as well as a responsibility to protect in cases of humanitarian disaster, we would be working as a country much more effectively in Darfur, as we've been called to do by my friend Erwin Kotler, and in Sri Lanka, a country about which I've had the opportunity to learn over the past many, many years, where our voice and our leadership have frankly been completely lacking in the past 2 years. We would be insisting in each of these cases on real peace talks, on real ceasefires, on real recognition of human rights, and real recognition of international law. And we would be insisting that our diplomacy and our aid efforts would be heading in the same direction to achieve these goals. Au Moyen-Orient, une région qui était au cœur de la quête de paix depuis des décennies, le Canada devrait adopter une position qui est claire et axée sur ces principes. Notre rôle ne devrait pas se limiter à une simple neutralité, parce que nous sommes attachés à des valeurs et à des intérêts qui devraient être sans équivoque. Nous avons défendu le plan de partage de la Palestine en 1947 et 1948, notre engagement en faveur d'un État d'Israël dont les frontières soient sûres et reconnues, de livrer du terrorisme et de la violence est une question qui est trop importante pour que le gouvernement canadien se contente de rester neutre. Mais nous sommes aussi de fervents défenseurs de la primauté du droit, Nous avons, comme pays, participé à l'élaboration de la résolution d'août 247 en 1967, qui est toujours au cœur de tout entier.